6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Everybody. Oh Lord, almost forgot to unmute. And then again, I forgot that I did unmute. So that's how my day's going. Hope y'all's is better. Yeah, fix my camera angle. My house is a mess. I apologize. So yeah, forgive me if I'm a little tired and scatterbrained today. Glad to be here. Sorry I missed last week. Almost missed this week, but I couldn't do that to y'all. So yeah. Let me know how you guys are doing. Happy Thursday. I am really glad that the week is almost over and it feels like it just started. So that is where I'm at. Oh, Sam, this is for you if you're watching or if you watch later. That's why I chose this mug. It's definitely not because the other mugs are still sitting in the dishwasher. But I saw it and I was like, yay, I'm just gonna use that mug today for my tea. It's for you too, mud crab. Yeah. So, yep. I'm here. I'm alive, ready to read. I barely remember anything of what happened the last time we read. I know that it was like part 2 and 3 because of the weird friggin' chapters. So things are coming back to me kind of. She met some more characters. Yeah. And they were about to learn why they were at the house. Eleanor, our protagonist, is a very scatterbrained woman. Not scatterbrained. Apparently that's my word of the day. Sorry. She's very flighty. She, what is the term I'm looking for? I'm kind of just jumping into the recap because I am very disorganized today. So y'all have to deal with that. Yeah. I'm gonna say hi to y'all and then hopefully get my thoughts in order, and y'all can help me with that in the chat as well, and maybe we'll figure it out together. Oh, look at that. Sam was the first to comment. Is that correct? No? Yes? What the heck is going on with my chat? I don't know. What is this? No. Okay. Legatus. There we go. Hi. How's it going? Hello, Mud Crab. Got badly mauled by them. No, they didn't. I don't know. No. First of all, I wasn't mauled by the giant earwig. Second of all, the cats would not have been able to help either way in any form. Yeah. Hi, Mudcrab. And hi, Sam. There's your chat that I lost moments ago. I apologize. Dom, hello, good friend. Maybe you should post it in here, Dom. It might help my brain if you have the space. What's up, Kel? How's it going? Thank you, everybody, for being here. Do we get the real horror story from basic cookie recipes? Actually, though it's not a horror story, thank you very much. Jess Lindstrom on Twitter, in the midst of all of the chaos that was the Cookie Wars, she had shared a link to oatmeal raisin cream pies, or whatever they're called, cream-filled cookie sandwiches. I swear there's a name for them, and I can't freaking remember. I'm gonna bring it up. I bookmarked it. I shall find it. Oh, also, I'm taking a bit of a break from social media beyond like streaming and such. So if I'm not posting a lot, that is why. I just need a mental break. Yeah, oatmeal cream pies, Little Debbie copycat. That's what she shared. So if you want that, because clearly you're such a big fan, you can go find that. I'm not gonna share it with you, because that would be too nice. Although I feel like you weren't really a oatmeal raisin cookie hater. I feel like you were trying to just be chaos incarnate. You let me know though. I could be misremembering that. Yeah, I know it's super out of the blue. Definitely never happens. Me being discombobulated. I'm completely and totally organized. Don't look at things behind me, like over here. Gravy D, hello, my friend. How's it going? And hello, your average Patriot nerd. Yay, recap. They ended in their sitting room having drinks, about to dive into why they were there. I believe, yes. That is also what I remember. Let's see what Dom has to say. Not too much exciting things happen. The book's weird and annoying with the length of each different chapter. Eleanor's at the house, meets Mrs. Dudley, who brings her to her room. Ah, you're doing like the full book recap, kind of. Sort of. Yeah, this is definitely cooking the books, not baking the oatmeal raisin cookies. You're correct, Legatus. But anyway, they had dinner, and then they're like in the parlor type area. All of that. Yeah, they needed to be at the table at 6 sharp. After she leaves, before it turns dark, she lives 6 miles away. Yep. Forget, it's too annoying. But yeah, I mean, that's a good summary. Like, she met all the peoples. Luke, Theodora, is that her name? Yeah, the doc, her. Is it just the 4 of them? Yeah, and the doctor was trying to push it until the morning, but they were like, no, you need to tell us now. Blase, blase, blah. Yeah. So that was the short and sweet recap, as is currently. I guess I can take that off screen. Sorry, Dom. Let's see. Housekeeping things. It's not really housekeeping. Lord, I am so out of it. At least I don't have to do much beyond talk to you guys and read a book. Thinking, oh my God, what is this? What is this? This is my cowlick. Everybody, just freaking whatever. Go behind the ear and stay there. Stay. All right, cool. I think I needed an extra nap today. Whatever. Where was I? Oh, Stream Elements is pinned at the top of chat. If anyone feels so generous, I appreciate anything that you can give if you can. Otherwise, don't worry about it. I expect nothing. I just want you to be here and enjoy with me. So, yeah, that is where we're at. That, and like I had said last time, basically, it was like, what, 2 chapters, I think? Maybe 3 chapters in part 2, which was chapters. There were like 2 paragraphs in one for 1 chapter, so we're not doing that. Looks like we're starting part 3, chapter 4 today. Should be, at least. No. Part 3, chapter 4. Yep. All right, cool. These characters are so... Do I say weird? Is that a taboo word now? Quirky? So it'll be interesting to continue the story. Yep, the 4 of them and the old creepy couple. Although the creepy couple doesn't stay with them overnight because they're not crazy people and staying at a haunted freaking house. That is clearly haunted. I mean, come on, that description. Give me a break. Everybody knows this place is haunted. So let's get started with chapter 4, shall we? Sorry. Part 3, chapter 4. I had not decided, the doctor said, turning the brandy in his glass, how best to prepare the 3 of you for Hill House. I certainly could not write you about it, and I am most unwilling now to influence your minds with its complete history before you have had a chance to see for yourselves. They were back in the small parlor, warm and almost sleepy. Theodora had abandoned any attempt at a chair and had put herself down on the hearthrug, cross-legged and drowsy. Eleanor, wanting to sit on the hearthrug beside her, had not thought of it in time and had condemned herself to one of the slippery chairs, unwilling now to attract attention by moving and getting herself awkwardly down onto the floor. Mrs. Dudley's good dinner and an hour's quiet conversation had evaporated the faint air of unreality and constraint. They had begun to know one another, recognize individual voices and mannerisms, faces and laughter. Eleanor thought with a little shock of surprise that she had been in Hill House only for 4 or 5 hours and smiled a little at the fire. She could feel the thin stem of her glass between her fingers, the stiff pressure of the chair against her back, the faint movements of air through the room which were barely perceptible in small stirrings of tassels and beads. Darkness lay in the corners, and the marble Cupid smiled down on them with chubby good humor. What a time for a ghost story, Theodora said. If you please, the doctor was stiff. We are not children trying to frighten one another, he said. Sorry, Theodora smiled at him. I'm just trying to get myself used to all of this. Let us, said the doctor, exercise great caution in our language. Preconceived notions of ghosts and apparitions, the disembodied hand in the soup, Luke said helpfully. My dear boy, if you please. I was trying to explain that our purpose here, since it is of a scientific and exploratory nature, ought not to be affected, perhaps even warped, by half-remembered spooky stories, which belong more properly to a marshmallow roast. Pleased with himself, he looked around to be sure that they were all amused. As a matter of fact, my researches over the past few years have led me to certain theories regarding psychic phenomena, which I have now, for the first time, an opportunity of testing. Ideally, of course, you ought not to know anything about Hill House. You should be ignorant and receptive. And take notes, Theodora murmured. Notes. Yes, indeed, notes. However, I realize that it is most impractical to leave you entirely without background information, largely because you are not people accustomed to meeting situation without preparation. He beamed at them slyly. You are three willful, spoiled children who are prepared to nag me for your bedtime story. Theodora giggled, and the doctor nodded at her happily. He rose and moved to stand by the fire in an unmistakable classroom pose. He seemed to feel the lack of a blackboard behind him, because once or twice he half turned, hand raised, as though looking for chalk to illustrate a point. Now, he said, we will take up the history of Hill House. I wish I had a notebook and a pen, Eleanor thought, just to make him feel at home. She glanced at Theodora and Luke and found both their faces fallen instinctively into a completely rapt classroom look. High earnestness, she thought. We have moved into another stage of our adventure. You will recall, the doctor began, the houses described in Leviticus as leprous. Saras? Tsaraas. I don't even know what language that is. Or Homer's phrase for the underworld, Idaudomos, the house of Hades. I need not remind you, I think, that the concept of certain houses as unclean or forbidden, perhaps sacred, is as old as the mind of man. Certainly there are spots which inevitably attach to themselves an atmosphere of holiness and goodness. It might not then be too fanciful to say that some houses are born bad. Hill House, whatever the cause, has been unfit for human habitation for upwards of 20 years. What it was like before then, whether its personality was molded by the people who live here, or the things they did, or whether it was evil from its start, are all questions I cannot answer. Naturally, I hope that we will all know a good deal more about Hill House before we leave. No one knows even why some houses are called haunted. What else could you call Hill House? Luke demanded. Well, disturbed perhaps, leprous, sick, any of the popular euphemisms for insanity. A deranged house is pretty conceit. There are popular theories, however, which discount the eerie, the mysterious. There are people who will tell you that the disturbances I am calling psychic are actually the result of subterranean waters, or electric currents, or hallucinations caused by polluted air. Atmospheric pressure, sunspots, earth tremors all have their advocates among the skeptical. People, the doctor said sadly, are always so anxious to get things out into the open where they can put a name to them, even a meaningless name, so long as it has something of a scientific ring. He sighed, relaxing, and gave them a little quizzical smile. A haunted house, he said. Everyone laughs. I found myself telling my colleagues at the university that I was going camping this summer. I told people I was participating in a scientific experiment, Theodora said helpfully, without telling them where or what, of course. Presumably your friends feel less strongly about scientific experiments than mine. Yes, the doctor sighed again. Camping. At my age. And yet that they believed. Well, he straightened up again and fumbled at his side, perhaps for a yardstick. I first heard about Hill House a year ago from a former tenant. He began by assuring me that he had left Hill House because his family objected to living so far out in the country, and ended by saying that in his opinion the house ought to be burned down and the ground sowed with salt. I learned of other people who had rented Hill House, and found that none of them had stayed more than a few days, certainly never the full terms of their leases, giving reasons that ranged from dampness of the location, not at all true, by the way, the house is very dry, to a pressing need to move elsewhere for business reasons. That is, every tenant who has left Hill House hastily has made an effort to supply a rational reason for leaving, and yet every one of them has left. I tried, of course, to learn more from these former tenants, and yet in no case could I persuade them to discuss the house. They all seemed most unwilling to give me information and were, in fact, reluctant to recall the details of their several stays. In only one opinion were they united. Without exception, every person who has spent any length of time in this house urged me to stay as far away from it as possible. Not one of the former tenants could bring himself to admit that Hill House was haunted. But when I visited Hillsdale and looked up the newspaper records, newspapers? Theodora asked. Was there a scandal? Oh, yes, the doctor said. A perfectly splendid scandal with a suicide and madness and lawsuits. Then I learned that the local people had no doubts about the house. I heard a dozen different stories, of course. It is really unbelievably difficult to get accurate information about a haunted house. It would astonish you to know that I have gone through to learn only as much as I have, and as a result, I went to Mrs. Sanderson, Luke's aunt, and arranged to rent Hill House. She was most frank about its undesirability. It's harder to burn down a house than you think, Luke said, but agreed to allow me a short lease to carry out my researches, on condition that a member of the family be one of my party. They hope, Luke said solemnly, that I will dissuade you from digging up the lovely old scandals. There. Now I have explained how I happen to be here and why Luke has come. As for you two ladies, we all know by now that you are here because I wrote you and you accepted my invitation. I hoped that each of you might, in her own way, intensify the forces at work in the house. Theodora has shown herself possessed of some telepathic ability, and Eleanor has in the past been intimately involved in poltergeist phenomena. I? Of course. The doctor looked at her curiously. Many years ago, when you were a child, the stones... Eleanor frowned and shook her head. Her fingers trembled around the stem of her glass, and then she said, "That was the neighbors. My mother said the neighbors did that. People are always jealous." Perhaps so, the doctor spoke quietly and smiled at Eleanor. The incident has been forgotten long ago, of course. I only mentioned it because that is why I wanted you in Hill House. When I was a child, Theodora said lazily, many years ago, doctor, as you put it so tactfully, I was whipped for throwing a brick through a greenhouse roof. I remember I thought about it for a long time, remembering the whipping, but remembering also the lovely crash. And after thinking about it very seriously, I went out and did it again. I don't remember very well, Eleanor said uncertainly to the doctor. But why? Theodora asked. I mean, I can accept that Hill House is supposed to be haunted, and you want us here, Dr. Montague, to help keep track of what happens. And I bet besides that, you wouldn't at all like being here alone. But I just don't understand. It's a horrible old house, and if I rented it, I'd scream for my money back after one fast look at the front hall. But what's here? What really frightens people so? I will not put a name to what has no name, the doctor said. I don't know. They never even told me what was going on, Eleanor said urgently to the doctor. My mother said it was the neighbors. They were always against us because she wouldn't mix with them. My mother, Luke interrupted her slowly and deliberately. I think, he said, that what we all want is facts, something we can understand and put together. First, the doctor said, I am going to ask you all a question. Do you want to leave? Do you advise that we pack up now and leave Hill House to itself and never have anything more to do with it? He looked at Eleanor, and Eleanor put her hands together tight. It is another chance to get away, she was thinking, and she said, no, and glanced with embarrassment at Theodora. I was kind of a baby this afternoon, she explained. I did let myself get frightened. She's not telling all the truth, Theodora said loyally. She wasn't any more frightened than I was. We scared each other to death over a rabbit. Pardon me. Horrible creatures, rabbits, Luke said. The doctor laughed. I suppose we were all nervous this afternoon anyway. It was a rude shock to turn that corner and get a clear look at Hill House. I thought he was going to send the car into a tree, Luke said. I'm really very brave now, in a warm room with a fire and company, Theodora said. I don't think we could leave now if we wanted to. Eleanor had spoken before she realized clearly what she was going to say, or what it was going to sound like to the others. She saw that they were staring at her and laughed and added lamely, Mrs. Dudley would never forgive us. She wondered if they really believed that that was what she had meant to say, and thought, perhaps it has us now, this house. Perhaps it will not let us go. Let us have a little more brandy, the doctor said, and I will tell you the story of Hill House. He returned to his classroom position before the fireplace and began slowly, as one giving an account of kings long dead and wars long done with. His voice was carefully unemotional. Hill House was built 80-odd years ago, he began. It was built as a home for his family by a man named Hugh Crane, a country home where he hoped to see his children and grandchildren live in comfortable luxury, and where he fully expected to end his days in quiet. Unfortunately, Hill House was a sad house almost from the beginning. Hugh Crane's young wife died minutes before she first was to set eyes on the house, when the carriage bringing her here overturned in the driveway, and the lady was brought, lifeless, I believe is the phrase they use, into the home her husband had built for her. He was a sad and bitter man, Hugh Crane, left with 2 small daughters to bring up, but he did not leave Hill House. Children grew up here? Eleanor asked incredulously. The doctor smiled. The house is dry, as I said. There were no swamps to bring them fevers. The country air was thought to be beneficial to them, and the house itself was regarded as luxurious. I have no doubt that 2 small children could play here, lonely perhaps, but not unhappy. I hope they went wading in the brook, Theodora said. She stared deeply into the fire. Poor little things. I hope someone let them run in that meadow and pick wildflowers. Their father married again, the doctor went on. Twice more, as a matter of fact. He seems to have been unlucky in his wives. The second Mrs. Crane died of a fall, although I have been unable to ascertain how or why. Her death seems to have been as tragically unexpected as her predecessors. The third Mrs. Crane died of what they used to call consumption, somewhere in Europe. There is, somewhere in the library, a collection of postcards sent to the 2 little girls left behind in Hill House from their father and their stepmother, traveling from one health resort to another. The little girls were left here with their governess until their stepmother's death. After that, Hugh Crane declared his intention of closing Hill House and remaining abroad, and his daughters were sent to live with a cousin of their mother's, and there they remained until they were grown up. I hope Mama's cousin was a little jollier than old Hugh, Theodora said, still staring darkly into the fire. It's not nice to think of children growing up like mushrooms in the dark. They felt differently, the doctor said. The 2 sisters spent the rest of their lives quarreling over Hill House. After all his high hopes of a dynasty centered there, Hugh Crane died somewhere in Europe shortly after his wife, and Hill House was left jointly to the 2 sisters, who must have been quite young ladies by then. The older sister had, at any rate, made her debut into society, and put up her hair and learned to drink champagne and carry a fan. Hill House was empty for a number of years, but kept always in readiness for the family. At first in expectation of Hugh Crane's return, and then after his death, for either of the sisters who chose to live there. Somewhere before this time, it was apparently agreed between the 2 sisters that Hill House should become the property of the older. The younger sister had married. Aha, Theodora said. The younger sister married. Stole her sister's beau, I've no doubt. It was said that the older sister was crossed in love, the doctor agreed, although that is said of almost any lady who prefers, for whatever reason, to live alone. At any rate, it was the older sister who came back here to live. She seems to have resembled her father strongly. She lived here alone for a number of years, almost in seclusion, although the village of Hillsdale knew her. Incredible as it may sound to you, she genuinely loved Hill House and looked upon it as her family home. She eventually took a girl from the village to live with her as a kind of companion. So far as I can learn, there seems to have been no strong feeling among the villagers about the house then, since old Miss Crane, as she was inevitably known, hired her servants in the village, and it was thought a fine thing for her to take the village girl as a companion. Old Miss Crane was in constant disagreement with her sister over the house, the younger sister insisting that she had given up her claim on the house in exchange for a number of family heirlooms, some of considerable value, which her sister then refused to give her. There were some jewels, several pieces of antique furniture, and a set of gold-rimmed dishes, which seemed to irritate the younger sister more than anything else. Mrs. Sanderson let me rummage through a box of family papers, and so I've seen some of the letters Miss Crane received from her sister, and in all of them, those dishes stand out as the recurrent sore subject. At any rate, the older sister died of pneumonia here in the house, with only the little companion to help her. There were stories later of a doctor called too late, of the old lady lying neglected upstairs while the younger woman dallied in the garden with some village lout. But I suspect that these are only scandalous inventions. I certainly cannot find that anything of the sort was widely believed at the time, and in fact, most of the stories seem to stem directly from the poisonous vengefulness of the younger sister, who never rested in her anger. I don't like the younger sister, Theodora said. First she stole her sister's lover, and then she tried to steal her sister's dishes. No, I don't like her. Hill House has an impressive list of tragedies connected with it, but then most old houses have. People have to live and die somewhere, after all, and a house can hardly stand for 80 years without seeing some of its inhabitants die within its walls. After the death of the older sister, there was a lawsuit over the house. The companion insisted that the house was left to her, but the younger sister and her husband maintained most violently that the house belonged legally to them, and claimed that the companion had tricked the older sister into signing away property which she had always intended leaving to her sister. It was an unpleasant business, like all family quarrels, and as in all family quarrels, incredibly harsh and cruel things were said on either side. The companion swore in court, and here, I think, is the first hint of Hill House in its true personality, that the younger sister came into the house at night and stole things. When she was pressed to enlarge upon this accusation, she became very nervous and incoherent, and finally, forced to give some evidence for her charge, said that a silver service was missing, and a valuable set of enamels, in addition to the famous set of gold-rimmed dishes, which would actually be a very difficult thing to steal when you think about it. For her part, the younger sister went so far as to mention murder and demand an investigation into the death of old Miss Crane, bringing up the first hints of the stories of neglect and mismanagement. I cannot discover that these suggestions were ever taken seriously. There is no record whatever of any but the most formal notice of the older sister's death, and certainly the villagers would have been the first to wonder if there had been any oddness about the death. The companion won her case at last, and could, in my opinion, have won a case for slander besides, and the house became legally hers, although the younger sister never gave up trying to get it. She kept after the unfortunate companion with letters and threats, made the wildest accusations against her everywhere, and in the local police records there is listed at least one occasion when the companion was forced to apply for police protection to prevent her enemy from attacking her with a broom. The companion went in terror, seemingly. Her house burgled at night. She never stopped insisting that they came and stole things. And I read one pathetic letter in which she complained that she had not spent a peaceful night in the house since the death of her benefactor. Oddly enough, sympathy around the village was almost entirely with the younger sister, perhaps because the companion, once a village girl, was now lady of the manor. The villagers believed, and still believe, I think, that the younger sister was defrauded of her inheritance by a scheming young woman. They did not believe that she would murder her friend, you see, but they were delighted to believe that she was dishonest, certainly because they were capable of dishonesty themselves when opportunity arose. Well, gossip is always a bad enemy. When the poor creature killed herself, Eleanor shocked into speech, half rose. She had killed herself? You mean, was there another way of escaping her tormentor? She certainly did not seem to think so. It was accepted locally that she had chosen suicide because her guilty conscience drove her to it. I am more inclined to believe that she was one of those tenacious, unclever young women who can hold on desperately to what they believe is their own, but cannot withstand. Mentally, a constant nagging persecution. She had certainly no weapons to fight back against the younger sister's campaign of hatred. Her own friends in the village had been turned against her, and she seems to have been maddened by the conviction that locks and bolts could not keep out the enemy who stole into her house at night. She should have gone away, Eleanor said, left the house and run as far as she could go. In effect, she did. I really think the poor girl was hated to death. She hanged herself, by the way. Gossip says she hanged herself from the turret on the tower, but when you have a house like Hill House with a tower and a turret, gossip would hardly allow you to hang yourself anywhere else. After her death, the house passed legally into the hands of the Sanderson family, who were cousins of hers and in no way is vulnerable to the persecutions of the younger sister, who must have been a little demented herself by that time. I heard from Mrs. Sanderson that when the family, it would have been her husband's parents, first came to see the house, the younger sister showed up to abuse them, standing on the road to howl at them as they went by, and found herself packed right off to the local police station. And that seems to be the end of the younger sister's part in the story. From the day the first Sanderson sent her packing to the brief notice of her death a few years later, she seemed to have spent her time brooding silently over her wrongs, but far away from the Sandersons. Oddly enough, in all her ranting, she insisted always on one point. She had not, would not, come into this house at night to steal for any other reason. Or for any other reason. Was anything ever really stolen? Luke asked. As I told you, the companion was finally pressed into saying that one or two things seemed to be missing, but could not say for sure. As you can imagine, the story of the nightly intruder did a good deal to enhance Hill House's further reputation. Moreover, the Sandersons did not live here at all. They spent a few days in the house, telling the villagers that they were preparing it for their immediate occupancy, and then abruptly cleared out, closing the house the way it stood. They told around the village that urgent business took them to live in the city, but the villagers thought they knew better. No one has lived in the house since for more than a few days. I will start that over. No one has lived in the house since for more than a few days at a time. It has been on the market, for sale or rent, ever since. Well, that is a long story. I need more brandy. Those two poor little girls, Eleanor said, looking into the fire. I can't forget them, walking through these dark rooms, trying to play dolls, maybe, in here or those bedrooms upstairs. And so the old house has just been sitting here. Luke put out a tentative finger and touched the marble cupid gingerly. Nothing in it touched, nothing used, nothing here wanted by anyone anymore, just sitting here thinking. And waiting, Eleanor said. And waiting, the doctor confirmed. Essentially, he went on slowly, the evil is the house itself, I think. It has enchanted and destroyed its people and their lives. It is a place of contained ill will. Well, tomorrow you will see it all. The Sandersons put in electricity and plumbing and a telephone when they first thought to live here, but otherwise nothing has been changed. Well, Luke said with a little silence, I'm sure we will all be very comfortable here. Whew, that was a long-winded chapter for the first one, huh? Definitely need more tea. So what do you think of that story? Spooky backstory to the house? Yay, nay? Are they altogether spooky? Hey, Shadow. How's it going? Hope you had a good day. Welcome. I actually don't think it was mentioned previously. I don't remember them talking about Theodora being telepathic, at least. Oh, hey, Faye. Welcome. Glad you're here. Oh, well, happy birthday, my dear. I will not be rude and ask how old. Ah, but that makes you a Leo, huh? The only reason I know that is because I'm a Virgo at the end of the month. I don't know any of the other zodiacs. I mean, like, where they lie in all that frou-frou crap. Happy belated birthday. I feel like, did you tell me at some point it was your birthday? And then I just forgot because I suck, which definitely is true. Which she, the older sister? Because I was wondering if it really was a suicide or not. Yes, definitely was a long chapter. I don't know. I feel like it'd be kind of cool, but I'm kind of a freak like that. Just because people die in a house doesn't mean it's automatically haunted. Although this one, you know, I probably would not stay in it. Sounds like the wife spent her last night among the living impaired in the house and maybe never left. Yeah. It's true. I'm not really, right now, this is not scary. Let's say. Oh, hey, Blue Cord. Welcome, welcome. How are you? I do find it interesting that Eleanor still is deluded by the, well, I guess it's not necessarily deluded. Maybe the neighbors were doing it, but basically the doctor was the one telling her about the poltergeist. Like she's in denial about what happened. And at some point in my brain, I remember that the introduction to the book that I got like 3/4 of the way through, maybe. It was a really long introduction. Gave a lot of the story away. So now I'm wondering if I'm remembering from the introduction something that they shouldn't have said that they said about the book instead of the book telling me. So there's that. Oops. Oh, Lord. Dom. Thank you. $30 from Dom. Here's to a better day. Have some chocolate chip cookies on me. Thank you. I don't eat cookies. Sometimes I do cheat meal things. So the next one might just be, you know, oatmeal raisin cookies to spite you. But I would be making them. Actually, I could probably make cookies now that I have einkorn flour. So I'm a ketovore, for anyone who does not know, where I'm mostly just carnivore in what I eat, but a tiny side of keto because reasons. Because keto and carnivore are very similar diets. Basically, I want bread. So I have what's called einkorn flour, and I make homemade bread. And I only recently discovered it. Otherwise, I've been purchasing like a store-bought keto bread that tastes the most similar to regular bread. So yeah, I could make my own keto cookies, in which the einkorn flour is basically like ye olden times wheat, and hasn't been like, I can't remember the exact description. Like the seeds are lower in carbs, the way wheat used to be, or something along those lines. But anyway, Merrick. Well, see, Dom, this just came in. Technically, you can have einkorn pizza, and it's keto version. And at least in like the homemade bread, it's just like regular bread. So it's not even like, there's really not a difference. It's great. I love it. I do not only eat crayons. Thank you very much. That was just my military days. All right. Hey guys, we're like halfway through the book. What are you guys thinking so far? I know it's not scary yet. There's no way any of you are scared, so we'll see. Let me know your thoughts while I read the next chapter to you. Part 3, Chapter 5. Eleanor found herself unexpectedly admiring her own feet. Theodora dreamed over the fire just beyond the tips of her toes, and Eleanor thought with deep satisfaction that her feet were handsome in their red sandals. What a complete and separate thing I am, she thought, going from my red toes to the top of my head individually and I possessed of attributes belonging only to me. I have red shoes, she thought. That goes with being Eleanor. I dislike lobster and sleep on my left side and crack my knuckles when I am nervous and save buttons. I am holding a brandy glass, which is mine because I am here and I am using it and I have a place in this room. I have red shoes, and tomorrow I will wake up and I will still be here. I have red shoes, she said very softly, and Theodora turned and smiled up at her. I had intended, and the doctor looked around at them with bright, anxious optimism. I had intended to ask if you all played bridge. Of course, Eleanor said. I play bridge, she thought. I used to have a cat named Dancer. I can swim. I'm afraid not, Theodora said, and the other three turned and regarded her with frank dismay. Not at all, the doctor asked. I've been playing bridge twice a week for 11 years, Eleanor said, with my mother and her lawyer and his wife. I'm sure you must play as well as that. Maybe you could teach me, Theodora asked. I'm quick at learning games. Oh dear, the doctor said, and Eleanor and Luke laughed. We'll do something else instead, Eleanor said. I can play bridge, she thought. I like apple pie with sour cream, and I drove her here by myself. Backgammon, the doctor said with bitterness. I play a fair game of chess, Luke said to the doctor, who cheered at once. Theodora set her mouth stubbornly. I didn't suppose we came here to play games, she said. Relaxation, the doctor said vaguely, and Theodora turned with a sullen shrug and stared again into the fire. I'll get the chessmen, if you'll tell me where, Luke said, and the doctor smiled. Better let me go, he said. I've studied a floor plan of the house, remember? If we let you go off wandering by yourself, we'd very likely never find you again. As the door closed behind him, Luke gave Theodora a quick, curious glance and then came over to stand by Eleanor. You're not nervous, are you? Did that story frighten you? Eleanor shook her head emphatically, and Luke said, You looked pale. I probably ought to be in bed, Eleanor said. I'm not used to driving as far as I did today. Brandy, Luke said. It will make you sleep better. You too, he said to the back of Theodora's head. Thank you, Theodora said coldly, not turning. I rarely have trouble sleeping. Luke grinned knowingly at Eleanor, and then turned as the doctor opened the door. My wild imagination, the doctor said, setting down the chess set. What a house this is. Did something happen? Eleanor said. The doctor shook his head. We probably ought to agree now not to wander around the house alone, he said. What happened? Eleanor asked. My own imagination, the doctor said firmly. This table all right, Luke? It's a lovely old chess set, Luke said. I wonder how the younger sister happened to overlook it. I can tell you one thing, the doctor said. If it was the younger sister sneaking around this house at night, she had nerves of iron. It watches, he added suddenly, the house. It watches every move you make. And then, my own imagination, of course. In the light of the fire, Theodora's face was stiff and sulky. She likes attention, Eleanor thought wisely, and without thinking, moved and sat on the floor beside Theodora. Behind her, she could hear the gentle sound of chessmen being set down on a board, and the comfortable small movements of Luke and the doctor taking each other's measure. And in the fire, there were points of flame and little stirrings. She waited a minute for Theodora to speak, and then said agreeably, "Still hard to believe you're really here?" "I had no idea it would be so dull," Theodora said. "We'll find plenty to do in the morning," Eleanor said. At home, there would be people around and lots of talking and laughing and lights and excitement. "I suppose I don't need such things," Eleanor said, almost apologetically. "There never was much excitement for me. I had to stay with Mother, of course. And when she was asleep, I kind of got used to playing solitaire or listening to the radio. I never could bear to read in the evenings because I had to read aloud to her for 2 hours every afternoon. Love stories," and she smiled a little, looking into the fire. "But that's not all," she thought, astonished at herself. "That doesn't tell what it was like, even if I wanted to tell. Why am I talking? I'm terrible, aren't I?" Theodora moved quickly and put her hand over Eleanor's. "I sit here and grouch because there's nothing to amuse me. I'm very selfish. Tell me how horrible I am." And in the firelight, her eyes shone with delight. "You're horrible," Eleanor said obediently. Theodora's hand on her own embarrassed her. She disliked being touched, and yet a small physical gesture seemed to be Theodora's chosen way of expressing contrition, or pleasure, or sympathy. "I wonder if my fingernails are clean," Eleanor thought, and slid her hand away gently. "I am horrible," Theodora said, good-humored again. "I'm horrible and beastly, and no one can stand me. There. Now tell me about yourself." "I'm horrible and beastly, and no one can stand me." Theodora laughed. "Don't make fun of me. You're sweet and pleasant, and everyone likes you very much. Luke has fallen madly in love with you, and I am jealous. Now I want to know more about you. Did you really take care of your mother for many years?" "Yes," Eleanor said. Her fingernails were dirty, and her hand was badly shaped, and people made jokes about love because sometimes it was funny. 11 years, until she died 3 months ago." "Were you sorry when she died?" "Should I say how sorry I am?" "No, she wasn't very happy. And neither were you, and neither was I." "But what about now? What did you do afterward when you were free at last?" "I sold the house," Eleanor said. "My sister and I each took whatever we wanted from it, small things. There was really nothing much, except little things my mother had saved, my father's watch and some old jewelry. Not at all like the Sisters of Hill House." "And you sold everything else?" "Everything, just as soon as I could. And then, of course, you started a gay, mad fling that brought you inevitably to Hill House." "Not exactly," Eleanor laughed. "But all those wasted years. Did you go on a cruise, look for exciting young men, buy new clothes?" "Unfortunately," Eleanor said dryly, "there was not at all that much money. My sister put her share into the bank for her little girl's education. I did buy some clothes to come to Hill House. People like answering questions about themselves," she thought. "What an odd pleasure it is. I would answer anything right now." "What will you do when you get back? Do you have a job?" "No, no job right now. I don't know what I'm going to do." "I know what I'll do," Theodora stretched luxuriously. "I'll turn on every light in our apartment and just bask." "What is your apartment like?" Theodora shrugged. "Nice," she said. "We found an old place and fixed it up ourselves. One big room and a couple of small bedrooms. Nice kitchen. We painted it red and white and made over a lot of old furniture we dug up in junk shops. One really nice table with a marble top. We both love doing over old things." "Are you married?" Eleanor asked. There was a little silence, and then Theodora laughed quickly and said no. "Sorry," Eleanor said, horribly embarrassed. "I didn't mean to be curious." "You're funny," Theodora said, and touched Eleanor's cheek with her finger. "There are lines by my eyes," Eleanor thought, and turned her face away from the fire. "Tell me where you live," Theodora said. Eleanor thought, looking down at her hands, which were badly shaped. "We could have afforded a laundress," she thought. "It wasn't fair. My hands are awful." "I have a little place of my own," she said slowly. "An apartment like yours, only I live alone. Smaller than yours, I'm sure. I'm still furnishing it. Buying one thing at a time, to make sure I get everything absolutely right. White curtains. I had to look for weeks before I found my little stone lions on each corner of the mantel, and I have a white cat and my books and records and pictures. Everything has to be exactly the way I want it, because there's only me to use it. Once I had a blue cup with stars painted on the inside. When you looked down into a cup of tea, it was full of stars. I want a cup like that. Maybe one will turn up someday in my shop, Theodora said. Then I can send it to you. Someday you'll get a little package saying, "To Eleanor with love from her friend Theodora," and it will be a blue cup full of stars. I would have stolen those gold-rimmed dishes, Eleanor said, laughing. Mate, Luke said. And the doctor said, "Oh dear, oh dear." Blind luck, Luke said cheerfully. Have you ladies fallen asleep there by the fire? Just about, Theodora said. Luke came across the room and held out a hand to each of them to help them up, and Eleanor, moving awkwardly, almost fell. Theodora rose in a quick motion and stretched and yawned. Theo is sleepy, she said. I'll have to lead you upstairs, the doctor said. Tomorrow we must really start to learn our way around. Luke, will you screen the fire? Had we better make sure that the doors are locked? Luke asked. I imagine that Mrs. Dudley locked the back door when she left, but what about the others? I hardly think we'll catch anyone breaking in, Theodora said. Anyway, the little companion used to lock her doors, and what good did it do her? Suppose we want to break out, Eleanor asked. The doctor glanced quickly at Eleanor and then away. I see no need for locking doors, he said quietly. There is certainly not much danger of burglars from the village, Luke said. In any case, the doctor said, I will not sleep for an hour or so yet. At my age, an hour's reading before bedtime is essential, and I wisely brought Pamela with me. If any of you has trouble sleeping, I will read aloud to you. I never yet knew anyone who could not fall asleep with Richardson being read aloud to him. Talking quietly, he led them down the narrow hallway and through the great front hall to the stairs. I have often planned to try it on very small children, he went on. Eleanor followed Theodora up the stairs. She had not realized until now how worn she was, and each step was an effort. She reminded herself naggingly that she was in Hill House, but even the blue room meant only, right now, the bed with the blue coverlet and the blue quilt. On the other hand, the doctor continued behind her, a Fielding novel comparable in length, although hardly in subject matter, would never do for very young children. I even have doubts about Sterna. Theodora went to the door of the green room and turned and smiled. If you feel the least bit nervous, she said to Eleanor, run right into my room. I will, Eleanor said earnestly. Thank you. Good night. And certainly not Smollett. Ladies, Luke and I are here on the other side of the stairway. What color are your rooms? Eleanor asked, unable to resist. Yellow, the doctor said, surprised. Pink, Luke said with a dainty gesture of distaste. We're blue and green down here, Theodora said. I will be awake reading, the doctor said. I will leave my door ajar, so I will certainly hear any sound. Good night. Sleep well. Good night, Luke said. Good night, all. As she closed the door of the blue room behind her, Eleanor thought wearily that it might be the darkness and oppression of Hill House that tired her so, and then it no longer mattered. The blue bed was unbelievably soft. Odd, she thought sleepily, that the house should be so dreadful, and yet in many respects so physically comfortable. The soft bed, the pleasant lawn, the good fire, the cooking of Mrs. Dudley. The company, too, she thought, and then thought, now I can think about them. I am all alone. Why is Luke here? But why am I here? Journeys end in lovers' meeting. They all saw that I was afraid. She shivered and sat up in bed to reach for the quilt at the foot. Then, half amused and half cold, she slipped out of bed and went, barefoot and silent, across the room to turn the key in the lock of the door. They won't know I locked it, she thought, and went hastily back to bed. With the quilt pulled up around her, she found herself looking with quick apprehension at the window, shining palely in the darkness, and then at the door. I wish I had a sleeping pill to take, she thought, and looked again over her shoulder compulsively at the window, and then again at the door, and thought, is it moving? But I locked it. Is it moving? I think, she decided concretely, that I would like this better if I had the blankets over my head. Hidden deep in the bed under the blankets, she giggled and was glad none of the others could hear her. In the city, she never sleeps with her head under the covers. I have come all this way today, she thought. Then she slept secure. In the next room, Theodora slept, smiling with her light on. Farther down the hall, the doctor, reading Pamela, lifted his head occasionally to listen, and once went to his door and stood for a minute, looking down the hall before going back to his book. A nightlight shone at the top of the stairs over the pool of blackness, which was the hall. Luke slept on his bedside table, a flashlight and the lucky piece Luke slept on his bedside table, a flashlight and the lucky piece he always carried with him. Around them, the house brooded, settling and stirring with a movement that was almost like a shudder. 6 miles away, Mrs. Dudley awakened, looked at her clock, thought of Hill House, and shut her eyes quickly. Mrs. Gloria Sanderson, who owned Hill House and lived 300 miles away from it, closed her detective story, yawned, and reached up to turn off her light, wondering briefly if she had remembered to put the chain on the front door. Theodora's friend slept, so did the doctor's wife and Eleanor's sister. Far away in the trees over Hill House, an owl cried, and toward morning a thin, fine rain began, misty and dull. Well, finally, to me at least, it seems like we're getting into the haunted portion of the book. So that's nice. I like haunted stories. Half of the book being taken up by meeting characters, I like a little less. Okay, it's a little hard for me not to be neutral as the narrator or reader, whatever, of this book for you. So you're getting my opinions in between. Crayons and Play-Doh, huh? Yeah, Play-Doh's not my thing, Mudcrab, but you do you. It sort of was at the end, right, Dom? A little bit scary. The room was moving, the window, the door. Yeah, so much has happened, your average Patriot nerd. A lot of talking, which is so my favorite thing in the world. Yeah, I could understand that, Blue Cord. Yeah, I'm fine, Dom. I don't know when you asked this. Might have been when I was getting tongue-tied because I needed a drink. My lips were dry. Speaking of. I don't know if I've ever actually played backgammon, but I'll take your word for it that it's fun. Hey, Alf, what's up? If you're still here. I don't know if you were just dropping in to say hi, but hello back, my friend. Thanks for coming by. I'm sure he can do something with cats. Yeah. Alf would eat them. Yes. So the girls got the blue and green rooms while the guys got the yellow and pink. Yeah. I thought that was interesting. Yes, it is a line that they say pretty often in here. There was something else that. Oh, okay. So like I was pausing when reading a certain portion of it. I found it interesting that she says that she had a cup that had like a blue cup with stars at the bottom. because that's the story with the girl when she like stopped at a diner for lunch on her way to the house. Like, this is starting to be the part where what is in her head and what actually happened. Like, was that story with her mother? I can't remember what happened to her father. Like, maybe when she was little, that's actually a story that she fabricated and didn't actually happen in reality. It's my thoughts, at least. I really didn't like that that little side quest, because drink your milk, but whatever. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm making that up out of whole cloth, but seems interesting to me. Let me know your thoughts. Don't trust the yes, correct. I would never trust the locks in a haunted house. Yeah, I thought it was super weird because you're normally a big chatter. You talk all the time. Actually, I guess I can take away the humor in my voice and the sarcasm. You do chat in chat often enough. Sam. Sorry it got busy, by the way. Hopefully it's not too terrible. Play-Doh, salty goodness plus bright colors. Like, please, Lord, tell me you don't actually eat Play-Doh. Like, fine as a kid, you know, whatever. Kids will be kids, but as an adult. Does anyone think the doctor could be bad in here as we go further in the story? I didn't pick up on that. Show your evidence for your theory. Not evidence. What am I looking for here? It's not really show your work. Defend your theory. Whatever. My grandparents taught me to play when we were kitties, and being babies out, Grandma and Grandpa used to play against them. Aw, that's a nice memory to have. We had like a chess checkers board where like the inside was backgammon. We just never played, and it had like dice. And is there dice in backgammon? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't dice. I don't know. Do you know if Adam's going live? I do not know. I know that he got back in late Saturday after the RNC and like his road trip back. I haven't heard anything, but I also haven't really been on the twat all that much in the group chat. So here, let me check for you. If there was, nope, there is no current activity. So I'm thinking probably not, unless it's super last minute. Maybe just keep an eye out for a notification. Oh, and I just finished reading what you said. Please don't drive. Please be safe. Walk home. Walking can be treacherous too, so maybe call for a safe ride, please. I know I sound sarcastic when I'm saying that. I'm not. I'm assuming that's your, that comment is reference to the doc comment earlier. Okay. I felt a little crazy, which I mean, everybody's a little crazy, I guess, when I was thinking there was dice in there. But good to know it is a dice game. Thank you. Oh, you are home. Okay, very well. Good. I'm glad you're home and safe. That was just the end of part 3, so we're about to start part 4. But I'm going to warm up my tea, top it off, and I will be right back. Hello. This is one of those color changing mugs. So earlier it was black because the tea was like down here and cold. So now you get to see the lovely little kitty again. Just for Mud Crab and Sam and anyone who doesn't like cats. I mean, who loves cats. Who may be watching on the replay or just not chatting. I do too. I feel like it's about to start picking up. Hopefully as well. Eleanor is driving me crazy, by the way. Her little I statements were driving me crazy. She is not my favorite character, and she is not redeeming herself yet. But they're cute, so it's all worth it, right, Blue Cord? That's how I see that, at least. Puppers. All right. Part 4, Chapter 1. Eleanor awakened to find the blue room gray and colorless in the morning rain. She found that she had thrown the quilt off during the night and had finished sleeping in her usual manner, with her head on the pillow. It was a surprise to find that she had slept until after 8, and she thought that it was ironic that the first good night's sleep she had had in years had come to her in Hill House. Lying in the blue bed, looking up into the dim ceiling with its remote carved pattern, she asked herself, half asleep still, what did I do? Did I make a fool of myself? Were they laughing at me? Thinking quickly over the evening before, she could remember only that she must have seemed foolishly, childishly contented, almost happy. Had the others been amused to see that she was so simple? I said silly things, she told herself, and of course they noticed. Today I will be more reserved, less openly grateful to all of them for having me. Then, awakening completely, she shook her head and sighed. You are a very silly baby, Eleanor, she told herself, as she did every morning. The room came clearly alive around her. She was in the blue room at Hill House. The dimity curtains were moving slightly at the window, and the wild splashing in the bathroom must be Theodora, awake, sure to be dressed and ready first, certain to be hungry. Good morning, Eleanor called, and Theodora answering, gasping, good morning. Through in a minute, I'll leave the tub filled for you. Are you starving? Because I am. Does she think I wouldn't bathe unless she left a full tub for me? Eleanor wondered, and then was ashamed. I came here to stop thinking things like that, she told herself sternly, and rolled out of bed and went to the window. She looked out across the veranda roof to the wide lawn below, with its bushes and little clumps of trees wound around the mist. Far down at the end of the lawn was the line of trees that marked the path to the creek, although the prospect of a jolly picnic in the grass was not, this morning, so appealing. It was clearly going to be wet all day, but it was a summer rain, deepening the green of the grass and the trees, sweetening and cleaning the air. It's charming, Eleanor thought, surprised at herself. She wondered if she was the first person ever to find Hill House charming, and then thought, chilled. Or did they all think so the first morning? She shivered and found herself at the same time unable to account for the excitement she felt, which made it difficult to remember why it was so odd to wake up happy in Hill House. I'll starve to death, Theodora pounded on the bathroom door, and Eleanor snatched at her robe and hurried. Try to look like a stray sunbeam, Theodora called out from her room. It's such a dark day, we've got to be a little brighter than usual. Sing before breakfast, you'll cry before night, Eleanor told herself, because she had been singing softly. In delay there lies no plenty. I thought I was the lazy one, Theodora said complacently through the door. But you're much, much worse. Lazy hardly begins to describe you. You must be clean enough now to come and have breakfast. Mrs. Dudley sets out breakfast at 9. What will she think when we show up bright and smiling? She will sob with disappointment. Did anyone scream for her in the night, do you suppose? Eleanor regarded a soapy leg critically. I slept like a log, she said. So did I. If you are not ready in 3 minutes, I will come in and drown you. I want my breakfast. Eleanor was thinking that it had been a very long time since she had dressed to look like a stray sunbeam, or been so hungry for breakfast, or arisen so aware, so conscious of herself, so deliberate and tender in her intentions. She even brushed her teeth with a niceness she could not remember ever feeling before. It is all the result of a good night's sleep, she thought. Since Mother died, I must have been sleeping even more poorly than I realized. Aren't you ready yet? Coming, Eleanor said, and ran to the door, remembered that it was still locked, and unlocked it softly. Theodora was waiting for her in the hall, vivid in the dullness in gaudy plaid. Looking at Theodora, it was not possible for Eleanor to believe that she ever dressed or washed or moved or ate or slept or talked without enjoying every minute of what she was doing. Perhaps Theodora never cared at all what other people thought of her. Do you realize that we may be another hour or so just finding the dining room? Theodora said. But maybe they have left us a map. Did you know that Luke and the doctor have been up for hours? I was talking to them from the window. They have started without me, Eleanor thought. Tomorrow I will wake up earlier and be there to talk from the window too. They came to the foot of the stairs, and Theodora crossed the great dark hall and put her hand confidently to a door. Here, she said, but the door opened into a dim, echoing room neither of them had seen before. Here, Eleanor said, but the door she chose led onto the narrow passage to the little parlor where last night they had sat before a fire. It's across the hall from that, Theodora said, and turned baffled. Damn it, she said, and put her head back and shouted, Luke, doctor? Distantly, they heard an answering shout, and Theodora moved to open another door. If they think, she said over her shoulder, that they are going to keep me forever in this filthy hall, trying one door after another to get my breakfast, that's the right one, I think, Eleanor said, with the dark room to go through, and then the dining room beyond. Theodora shouted again, blundered against some light piece of furniture, cursed, and then the door beyond was opened, and the doctor said, Good morning. Foul, filthy house, Theodora said, rubbing her knee. Good morning. You will never believe this now, of course, the doctor said, but 3 minutes ago these doors were wide open. We left them open so you could find your way. We sat here and watched them swing shut just before you called. Well, good morning. Kippers, Luke said from the table. Good morning. I hope you ladies are the kipper kind. What are kippers? Is that some sort of like fish or something? If anyone knows. It's like a British thing, isn't it? They have come through the darkness of one night. They had met morning in Hill House, and they were a family, greeting one another with easy informality and going to the chairs they had used last night at dinner, their own places at the table. A fine big breakfast is what Mrs. Dudley certainly agreed to set out at 9, Luke said, waving a fork. We had begun to wonder if you were the coffee and a roll in bed types. We would have been here much sooner in any other house, Theodora said. Did you really leave all the doors open for us? Eleanor asked. That's how we knew you were coming, Luke told her. We saw the doors swing shut. Today we will nail all the doors open, Theodora said. I'm going to pace this house until I can find 10 times out of 10. I slept with my light on all night, she confided to the doctor, but nothing happened at all. It was all very quiet, the doctor said. Did you watch over us all night? Eleanor asked. Until about 3, when Pamela finally put me to sleep. There wasn't a sound until the rain started sometime after 2. One of you ladies called out in her sleep once. That must have been me, Theodora said shamelessly, dreaming about the wicked sister at the gates of Hill House. I dreamed about her too, Eleanor said. She looked at the doctor and said suddenly, it's embarrassing to think about being afraid, I mean. We're all in it together, you know, Theodora said. It's worse if you try not to show it, the doctor said. Stuff yourself very full of kippers, Luke said. Then it will be impossible to feel anything at all. Eleanor felt, as she had the day before, that the conversation was being skillfully guided away from the thought of fear, so very present in her own mind. Perhaps she was She was to be allowed to speak occasionally for all of them so that, quieting her, they quieted themselves and could leave the subject behind them. Perhaps, vehicle for every kind of fear, she contained enough for all. They are like children, she thought crossly, daring each other to go first, ready to turn and call names at whoever comes last. She pushed her plate away from her and sighed. Before I go to sleep tonight, Theodora said, saying to the doctor, I want to be sure that I have seen every inch of this house. No more lying there wondering what is over my head or under me. And we have to open some windows and keep the doors open and stop feeling our way around. Little signs, Luke suggested. Arrows pointing, reading this way out. Or dead end, Eleanor said. Or watch out for falling furniture, Theodora said. We'll make them, she said to Luke. First, we all explore the house, Eleanor said, too quickly, perhaps, because Theodora turned and looked at her curiously. I don't want to find myself left behind in an attic or something, Eleanor added uncomfortably. No one wants to leave you behind anywhere, Theodora said. Then I suggest, Luke said, that we first of all finish off the coffee in the pot and then go nervously from room to room, endeavoring to discover some rational plan to this house and leaving doors open as we go. I never thought, he said, shaking his head sadly, that I would stand to inherit a house where I had to put up signs to find my way around. We need to find out what to call the rooms, Theodora said. Suppose I told you, Luke, that I would meet you clandestinely in the second best drawing room. How would you ever know where to find me? You could keep whistling till I got there, Luke offered. Theodora shuddered. You would hear me whistling and calling you while you wandered from door to door, never opening the right one, and I would be inside, not able to find any way to get out. And nothing to eat, Eleanor said unkindly. Theodora looked at her again, and nothing to eat, she agreed after a minute. Then, it's the crazy house at the carnival, she said. Rooms opening out of each other and doors going everywhere at once and swinging shut when you come. And I bet that somewhere there are mirrors that make you look all sideways and an air hose to blow up your skirts and something that comes out of a dark passage and laughs in your face. She was suddenly quiet and picked up her cup so quickly that her coffee spilled. Not as bad as all that, the doctor said easily. Actually, the ground floor is laid out in what I might almost call concentric circles of rooms. At the center is the little parlor where we sat last night. Around it, roughly, are a series of rooms, the billiard room, for instance, and a dismal little den entirely furnished in rose-colored satin, where Eleanor and I will go each morning with our needlework. And surrounding these, I call them the inside rooms because they are the ones with no direct way to the outside. They have no windows, you remember. Surrounding these are the ring of outside rooms, the drawing room, the library, the conservatory, No, Theodora said, shaking her head. I am still lost back in the rose-colored satin. And the veranda goes all around the house. There are doors opening onto the veranda from the drawing room and the conservatory and one sitting room. There is also a passage. Stop. Theodora was laughing, but she shook her head. It's filthy, rotten house. The swinging door in the corner of the dining room opened, and Mrs. Dudley stood, one hand holding the door open, looking without expression at the breakfast table. I clear off at 10, Mrs. Dudley said. Good morning, Mrs. Dudley, Luke said. Mrs. Dudley turned her eyes to him. I clear off at 10, she said. The dishes are supposed to be back on the shelves. I take them out again for lunch. I set out lunch at 1, but first the dishes have to be back on the shelves. Of course, Mrs. Dudley. The doctor rose and put down his napkin. Everybody ready? He asked. Under Mrs. Dudley's eye, Theodora deliberately lifted her cup and finished the last of her coffee, then touched her mouth with her napkin and sat back. Splendid breakfast, she said conversationally. Do the dishes belong to the house? They belong on the shelves, Mrs. Dudley said. And the glassware and the silver and the linen? Lovely old things. The linen, Mrs. Dudley said, belongs in the linen drawers in the dining room. The silver belongs in the silver chest. The glasses belong on the shelves. We must be quite a bother to you, Theodora said. Mrs. Dudley was silent. Finally, she said, I clear up at 10. I set out lunch at 1. Theodora laughed and rose. On, she said. On. Let us go and open the doors. They began reasonably enough with the dining room door, which they propped open with a heavy chair. The room beyond was the game room. The table against which Theodora had stumbled was a low, inlaid chess table. Now I could not have overlooked that last night, the doctor said irritably. And at one end of the room were card tables and chairs, and a tall cabinet where the chessmen had been, with croquet balls and the cribbage board. Jolly spot to spend a carefree hour, Luke said, standing in the doorway regarding the bleak room. The cold greens of the tabletops were reflected unhappily in the dark tiles around the fireplace. The inevitable wood paneling was, here, not at all enlivened by a series of sporting prints which seemed entirely devoted to various methods of doing wild animals to death, and over the mantel a deer head looked down upon them in patent embarrassment. This is where they came to enjoy themselves, Theodora said, and her voice echoed shakily from the high ceiling. They came here, she explained, to relax from the oppressive atmosphere of the rest of the house. The deerhead looked down on her mournfully. Those two little girls, she said, can we please take down that beast up there? I think it's taken a fancy to you, Luke said. It's never taken its eyes off of you since you came in. Let's get out of here. They propped the door open as they left and came out into the hall, which shone dully under the light from the open rooms. When we find a room with a window, the doctor remarked, we will open it. Until then, let us be content with opening the front door. You keep thinking of the little children, Eleanor said to Theodora, but I can't forget that lonely little companion walking around these rooms, wondering who else was in the house. Luke tugged the great front door open and wheeled the big vase to hold it. Fresh air, he said thankfully. The warm smell of rain and wet grass swept into the hall, and for a minute they stood in the open doorway, breathing air from outside Hill House. Then the doctor said, now here is something none of you anticipated, and he opened a small door tucked in beside the tall front door and stood back smiling. The library, he said, in the tower. I can't go in there, Eleanor said, surprising herself, but she could not. She backed away, overwhelmed with the cold air of mold and earth which rushed at her. My mother, she said, not knowing what she wanted to tell them, and pressed herself against the wall. Indeed, said the doctor, regarding her with interest. Theodora? Theodora shrugged and stepped into the library. Eleanor shivered. Luke, said the doctor, but Luke was already inside. From where she stood, Eleanor could see only a part of the circular wall of the library, with a narrow iron staircase going up and perhaps, since it was the tower, up and up and up. Eleanor shut her eyes, hearing the doctor's voice distantly, hollow against the stone of the library walls. Can you see the little trap door up there in the shadows? He was asking. It leads out onto a little balcony, and of course that's where she is commonly supposed to have hanged herself. The girl, you remember. A most suitable spot, certainly. More suitable for suicides, I would think, than for books. She is supposed to have tied the rope onto the iron railing and then just stepped. Thanks, Theodora said from within. I can visualize it perfectly, thank you. For myself, I would probably have anchored the rope onto the deer head in the game room, but I suppose she had some sentimental attachment to the tower. What a nice word, attachment, is in that context, don't you think? Delicious. It was Luke's voice, louder. They were coming out of the library and back to the hall where Eleanor waited. I think that I will make this room into a nightclub. I will put the orchestra up there on the balcony, and dancing girls will come down that winding iron staircase. The bar, Eleanor, Theodora said, are you all right now? It's a perfectly awful room, and you were right to stay out of it. How dare they say a library is awful? It's rude. Eleanor stood away from the wall. Her hands were cold and she wanted to cry, but she turned her back to the library door, which the doctor propped open with a stack of books. I don't think I'll do much reading while I'm here, she said, trying to speak lightly. Not if the books smell like the library. I hadn't noticed a smell, the doctor said. He looked inquiringly at Luke, who shook his head. Odd, the doctor went on, and just the kind of thing we're looking for. Make a note of it, my dear, and try to describe it exactly. Theodora was puzzled. She stood in the hallway, turning, looking back of her at the staircase, and then around again at the front door. Are there two front doors? She asked. Am I just mixed up? The doctor smiled happily. He had clearly been hoping for some such question. This is the only front door, he said. It is the one you came in yesterday. Theodora frowned. Then why can't Eleanor and I see the tower from our bedroom windows? Our rooms look out over the front of the house, and yet... The doctor laughed and clapped his hands. At last, he said, Clever Theodora. This is why I wanted you to see the house by day. Come, sit on the stairs while I tell you. Obediently, they sat on the stairs. Obediently, they settled on the stairs, looking up at the doctor, who took on his lecturing stance and began formally. One of the peculiar traits of Hill House is its design. Crazy house at the carnival. Precisely. Have you not wondered at our extreme difficulty in finding our way around? An ordinary house would not have had the four of us in such confusion for so long, and yet time after time we choose the wrong doors. The room we want eludes us. Even I have had my troubles. He sighed and nodded. I dare say, he went on, that old Hugh Crane expected that someday Hill House might become a showplace, like the Winchester House in California, or the many octagon houses. He designed Hill House himself, remember, and I have told you before, he was a strange man. Every angle, and the doctor gestured toward the doorway, every angle is slightly wrong. Hugh Crane must have detested other people in their sensible, squared-away houses, because he made his house to suit his mind. Angles, which you assume are the right angles you are accustomed to, and have every right to expect, are true, are actually a fraction of a degree off in one direction or another. I am sure, for instance, that you believe that the stairs you are sitting on are level, because you are not prepared for stairs which are not level. They moved uneasily, and Theodora put out a quick hand to take hold of the balustrade, as though she felt she might be falling, are actually on a very slight slant toward the central shaft. The doorways are all a very little bit off-center. That may be, by the way, the reason the doors swing shut unless they are held. I wondered this morning whether the approaching footsteps of you two ladies upset the delicate balance of the doors. Of course, the result of all these tiny aberrations of measurement adds up to a fairly large distortion in the house as a whole. Theodora cannot see the tower from her bedroom window because the tower actually stands at the corner of the house. From Theodora's bedroom window, it is completely invisible, although from here it seems to be directly outside her room. The window of Theodora's room is actually 15 feet to the left of where we are now. Theodora spread her hands helplessly. Golly, she said. I see, Eleanor said. The veranda roof is what misleads us. I can look out my window and see the veranda roof, and because I came directly into the house and up the stairs, I assumed that the front door was right below, although really, you see only the veranda roof, the doctor said. The front door is far away. It and the tower are visible from the nursery, which is the big room at the end of the hallway. We will see it later today. It is, and his voice saddened, a masterpiece of architectural misdirection. The double stairway at Chambord? Chambord? Chambord. Then everything is a little bit off-center, Theodora asked uncertainly. That's why it all feels so disjointed? What happens when you go back to a real house? Eleanor asked. I mean, a real house. It must be like coming off shipboard, Luke said. After being here for a while, your sense of balance could be so distorted that it would take you a while to lose your sea legs or your Hill House legs. Could it be, he asked the doctor, that what people have been assuming were supernatural manifestations were really only the result of a slight loss of balance in the people who live here? The inner ear, he told Theodora wisely. It must certainly affect people in some way, the doctor said. We have grown to trust blindly in our senses of balance and reason, and I can see where the mind might fight wildly to preserve its own familiar stable patterns against all evidence that it was leaning sideways. He turned away. We have marvels still before us, he said, and they came down from the stairway and followed him, walking gingerly, testing the floors as they moved. They went down the narrow passage to the little parlor where they had sat the night before, and from there, leaving doors propped open behind them, they moved into the outer circle of rooms, which looked out onto the veranda. They pulled heavy draperies away from the windows, and the light from outside came into Hill House. They passed through a music room where a harp stood sternly apart from them, with never a jangle of strings to mark their footfalls. A grand piano stood tightly shut, with a candelabra above, no candle ever touched by flame. A marble-top table held wax flowers under glass, and the chairs were twig-thin and gilded. Beyond this was the conservatory, with tall glass doors showing them the rain outside, and ferns growing damply around and over wicker furniture. Here it was uncomfortably moist, and they left it quickly, to come through an arched doorway into the drawing room and stand aghast and incredulous. It's not there, Theodora said, weak and laughing. I don't believe it's there. She shook her head. Eleanor, do you see it too? How? Eleanor said helplessly. I thought you would be pleased. The doctor was complacent. One entire end of the drawing room was in possession of a marble statuary piece. Against the mauve stripes and flowered carpet, it was huge and grotesque and somehow whitely naked. Eleanor put her hands over her eyes, and Theodora clung to her. I thought it might be intended for Venus rising from the waves, the doctor said. Not at all, said Luke, finding his voice. It's St. Francis curing the lepers. No, no, Eleanor said. One of them is a dragon. It's none of that, said Theodora roundly. It's a family portrait, you sillies. Composite? Anyone would know it at once. That figure in the center, that tall, undraped, good heavens, masculine one, that's old Hugh patting himself on the back because he built Hill House, and his two attendant nymphs are his daughters. The one on the right, who seems to be brandishing an ear of corn, is actually telling about her lawsuit, and the other one, the little one on the end, is the companion, and the one on the other end is Mrs. Dudley done from life, Luke said. And that grass stuff they're all standing on is really supposed to be the dining room carpet, grown up a little. Did anyone else notice that dining room carpet? It looks like a field of hay, and you can feel it tickling your ankles. In back, that kind of outspreading apple tree kind of thing, that's a symbol of the protection of the house, surely, Dr. Montague said. I'd hate to think it might fall on us, Eleanor said. Since the house is so unbalanced, Doctor, isn't there some chance of that? I have read that the statue was carefully and at great expense constructed to offset the uncertainty of the floor on which it stands. It was put in, at any rate, when the house was built, and it has not yet fallen. It is possible, that Hugh Crane admired it, even found it lovely. It is also possible that he used it to scare his children with, Theodora said. What a pretty room this would be without it. She turned, swinging. A dancing room, she said, for ladies in full skirts and room enough for a full country dance. Hugh Crane, will you take a turn with me? And she curtsied to the statue. I believe he's going to accept, Eleanor said, taking an involuntary step backwards. Don't let him tread on your toes, the doctor said, and laughed. Remember what happened to Don Juan. Theodora touched the statue timidly, putting her finger against the outstretched hand on one of the figures. Marble is always a shock, she said. It never feels like you think it's going to. I suppose a life-size statue looks enough like a real person to make you expect to feel skin. Then, turning again and shimmering in the dim room, she waltzed alone, turning to bow to the statue. At the end of the room, the doctor said to Eleanor and Luke, under those draperies, are doors leading onto the veranda. When Theodora is heated from dancing, she may step out into the cooler air. He went the length of the room to pull aside the heavy blue draperies and opened the doors. Again, the smell of the warm rain came in, and a burst of wind, so that a little breath seemed to move across the statue, and light touched the colored walls. Nothing in this house moves, Eleanor said, until you look away, and then you just catch something from the corner of your eye. Look at the little figurines on the shelves. When we all had our backs turned, they were dancing with Theodora. I move, Theodora said, circling them. Flowers under glass, Luke said. Tassels. I am beginning to fancy this house. Theodora pulled at Eleanor's hair. Race you around the veranda, she said, and darted for the doors. Eleanor, with no time for hesitation or thought, followed, and they ran out onto the veranda. Eleanor, running and laughing, came around a curve of the veranda to find Theodora going in another door and stopped, breathless. They had come to the kitchen, and Mrs. Dudley, turning away from the sink, watched them silently. Mrs. Dudley, Theodora said politely, we've been exploring the house. Mrs. Dudley's eyes moved to the clock on the shelf over the stove. It is 11:30, she said. I set lunch on at 1, Theodora said. We'd like to look over the kitchen, if we may. We've seen all the other downstairs rooms, I think. Mrs. Dudley was still for a minute, and then, moving her head acquiescently, turned and walked deliberately across the kitchen to a farther doorway. When she opened it, they could see the back stairs beyond, and Mrs. Dudley turned and closed the door behind her before she started up. Theodora cocked her head at the doorway and waited a minute before she said, I wonder if Mrs. Dudley has a soft spot in her heart for me. I really do. I suppose she's gone up to hang herself from the turret, Eleanor said. Let's see what's for lunch while we're here. Don't joggle anything, Theodora said. You know perfectly well that the dishes belong on the shelves. Do you think that woman really means to make us a souffle? Here is certainly a souffle dish, and eggs and cheese. It's a nice kitchen, Eleanor said. In my mother's house, the kitchen was dark and narrow, and nothing you cooked ever had any taste or color. What about your own kitchen? Theodora asked absently. In your little apartment? Eleanor, look at the doors. I can't make a souffle, Eleanor said. Look, Eleanor. There's the door onto the veranda, and another that opens onto steps going down, to the cellar, I guess, and another over there going onto the veranda again, and the one she used to go upstairs, and another one over there to the veranda again, Eleanor said, opening it. 3 doors going out onto the veranda from one kitchen. And the door to the butler's pantry, and on into the dining room. Our good Mrs. Dudley likes doors, doesn't she? She can certainly, and their eyes met, get out fast in any direction if she wants to. Eleanor turned abruptly and went back to the veranda. I wonder if she had Dudley cut extra doors for her. I wonder how she likes working in a kitchen where a door in back of her might open without her knowing it. I wonder, actually, just what Mrs. Dudley is in the habit of meeting in her kitchen, so that she wants to make sure that she'll find a way out no matter which direction she runs. Okay, I'm going to reread that sentence better. I wonder actually just what Mrs. Dudley is in the habit of meeting in her kitchen, so that she wants to make sure that she'll find a way out no matter which direction she runs. I wonder, shut up, Theodora said amiably. A nervous cook can't make a good souffle. Anyone knows that, and she's probably listening on the doors. Let us choose one of her doors and leave it open behind us. Luke and the doctor were standing on the veranda, looking out over the lawn. The front door was oddly close beyond them. Behind the house, seeming almost overhead, the great hills were muted and dull in the rain. Eleanor wandered along the veranda, thinking that she had never before known a house so completely surrounded. Like a very tight belt, she thought. Would the house fly apart if the veranda came off? She went what she thought must be the great part of the circle around the house, and then she saw the tower. It rose up before her suddenly, almost without warning, as she came around the curve of the veranda. It was made of gray stone, grotesquely solid, jammed hard against the wooden side of the house, with the insistent veranda holding it there. Hideous, she thought, and then thought that if the house burned away someday, the tower would still stand, gray and forbidding over the ruins, warning people away from what was left of Hill House, with perhaps a stone fallen here and there, so owls and bats might fly in and out and nest among the books below. Halfway up, windows began, thin, angled slits in the stone, and she wondered what it would be like, looking down from them, and wondered that she had not been able to enter the tower. I will never look down from those windows, she thought, and tried to imagine the narrow iron stairway going up and around inside. High on top was a conical wooden roof, topped by a wooden spire. It must have been laughable in any other house, but here in Hill House it belonged, gleefully and expectant, awaiting perhaps a slight creature creeping out from the little window onto the slanted roof, reaching up to the spire, knotting a rope. "You'll fall," Luke said, and Eleanor gasped. She brought her eyes down with an effort and found that she was gripping the veranda rail tightly and leaning far backward. "Don't trust your balance in my charming Hill House," Luke said, and Eleanor breathed deeply, dizzy, and staggered. He caught her and held her while she tried to steady herself in the rocking world where the trees and the lawn seemed somehow tilted sideways, and the sky turned and swung. "Eleanor?" Theodora said nearby, and she heard the sound of the doctor's feet running along the veranda. "This damnable house," Luke said. "You have to watch it every minute." "Eleanor," said the doctor. "I'm all right," Eleanor said, shaking her head and standing unsteadily by herself. "I was leaning back to see the top of the tower and I got dizzy." "She was standing almost sideways when I caught her," Luke said. "I've had that feeling once or twice this morning," Theodora said, "as though I was walking up the wall." "Bring her back inside," the doctor said. "It's not so bad when you're inside the house." "I'm really all right," Eleanor said, very much embarrassed, and she walked with deliberate steps along the veranda to the front door, which was closed. "I thought we left it open," she said with a little shake in her voice, and the doctor came past her and pushed the heavy door open again. Inside, the hall had returned to itself. All the doors they had left open were neatly closed. When the doctor opened the door into the game room, they could see beyond him that the doors to the dining room were closed, and the little stool they had used to prop one door open was neatly back in place against the wall. In the boudoir and the drawing room, the parlor and the conservatory, the doors and windows were closed, the draperies pulled together, and the darkness back again. "It's Mrs. Dudley," Theodora said, trailing after the doctor and Luke, who moved quickly from one room to the next, pushing doors wide open again and propping them, sweeping drapes away from windows and letting in the warm, wet air. "Mrs. Dudley did it yesterday, as soon as Eleanor and I were out of the way, because she'd rather shut them herself than come along and find them shut by themselves, because the doors belong shut and the windows belong shut and the dishes belong." She began to laugh foolishly, and the doctor turned and frowned at her with irritation. "Mrs. Dudley had better learn her place," he said. "I will nail these doors open if I have to." He turned down the passageway to their little parlor and sent the door swinging open with a crash. "Losing my temper will not help," he said, and gave the door a vicious kick. "Sherry in the parlor before lunch," Luke said amiably. "Ladies, enter." I apologize for the brief moments of me throwing things at my cats, if anyone noticed. Okay, so what is the consensus? What the hell are kippers? For real? Hey, they're not meh. They can be assholes at times, which does not define them as bastards. Sam, mud crab. Just at times. Yeah. I assume that was my Eleanor comments. Dumb. Mugs don't try and trip you up at the top of the stairs. I got nothing. Maybe this is all in Eleanor's head, and by the end of the book, she'll wake up in an institution. Yeah. She's interesting. There was something at the beginning of the chapter, actually. God, it's so ridiculous. Like, the next chapter is really short, and then chapter 3 is somewhat better, and then chapter 4 is normal, and there's a chapter 5. So weird. Oh, Lord, this was chapter 1, wasn't it? Oh, the freaking... Okay. I know back in ye olden times, they would share bathwater. It's not ye olden times for this book. Gross. Just gross. Like, you just met this woman. Like, what? Did that gross anyone else out? Because, really? Sharing bathwater? What? No. I don't know you. It was so weird. And also, I am the Theodora type. Although I guess I don't nag. But I just stew impatiently until those who I'm waiting on hurry the hell up. I don't like being late. I like to be places where we're supposed to be. Wake up happy. Of course, they are happy to wake up. They woke up. Yes, I thought that too, Legatus. Oh, hey, Clinton. How's it going? Kippers are a British herring dish. Canned herring snacks. It's funny. I read that as canned. I didn't even notice the typo. I must be tired. What's herring? Isn't that a bird? No, it's a fish. Okay. Oh, no. Sorry, Vegeta. It kind of is, but like an uninteresting clue. Because seriously, Eleanor is driving me crazy. I am intrigued to learn why she doesn't want to go into the library. By the way, if I had a spiral staircase, I would be in heaven. First of all, I would be heaven if I had a library. But a library with a spiral staircase up to a tower? Are you kidding me? Oh my God. Please. When I build my house, I'm doing that. Yeah, see, Clinton, the fact that it's fish, I'm good. You can eat them. I will not. All for you, sir. Says the same lines over and over. It's like she's a robot or something. I don't know if she's just traumatized by the house or like are the Dudleys. Well, it did say far away, like 3 miles away. Mrs. Dudley woke up and saw the time type of thing. Like there's something at a specific time I think will happen. Because like when they were all going to bed and that whole description thought it was interesting. Is it croquet? I swear to God they call it croquette. Freaking British. They're weird. Okay, Chambeau. Guttural French bullshit R sound. So it's really pronounced Chambeau instead of Chambord. So like the R and the D are silent. French, whatever. What does that even mean? I stand with Hugh Crane. Refresh my memory for when that came in, Sam. Why do you stand with Hugh Crane? that planning an escape route is something they have been saying all people should do in case of fire emergency at your home job. Yeah. That and having a muster point. So all can meet and one can count that all are there. You and your ACAB, ridiculous mud. So you did see me throwing things. Well, my alpha is a bit of a bully sometimes, especially when he wants food. So he bullies the not so aggressive one, the Omega, if you will. And so he was bullying. You grew up with siblings having to ship. No, see, maybe when we were little, yeah, that's whatever. But Theodora, they just met. That is weird. Is that not weird to you? Like with your siblings, it's a different story until a certain age. Yeah, and a shower is a thing. Not bad. Got a new fridge. Oh, nice. I can see how getting a new fridge and rearranging the entire house go hand in hand. Is it a bigger fridge than where the previous fridge was located? Or was it just used as an excuse to rearrange, to feng shui it? Oh, well, you didn't have the R in it. Okay, so the D is silent. Yeah, I just said that live. Okay. Chambord. God, that's ugh. Stupid French and their pretentious language. You were the one throwing stuff just because I'm a dog person doesn't mean I bully cats. I just don't let them in the house. Okay. First of all, yeah, I was throwing stuff. That's fine. I love dogs. I'm actually a dog person who happens to have cats because I love cats too. But I'm more so a dog person. But my cats are not dog cats. So, yeah. I feel like that pronunciation, Sam, is more your pronunciation. Okay, fine. When it's I'm not talking about public bathhouses. I'm talking about a bathtub where it is just someone else's water. Maybe I'm the weird one though. Fine. I don't think they actually think that they're cousins, Dom. That was more their joshing around quirkiness that they were having, like with Luke and everything. There's not really a serious tone to all the people. Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. Well, because you had to spell it out for me, but we can set that aside. Thanks, Sam. It was supposed to be 28.5 inches thick, but it was actually 30.5, so it'll not go into the kitchen. Okay, gotcha. I see. Very well. There was no judgment either way, Clinton, but... Well, and see, that's my point. So, like, just imagine a more compact area for the water. It's gross. Gross. I'm gonna say that you agree with me and think it's weird, Sam. At least I'll have some support, even if it's only in my head. Whatever. Oh wow, we just hit the 2-hour mark. I was not paying attention. Interesting. We had some long chapters today, yeah? This one has at least 5 chapters. So, oh, there's 6 chapters in this part. See, I hate lack of consistency. I really, really don't like it. 1 chapter. Okay, I will read the next 2 chapters before we close out. So get ready for chapter 2. It's super long. Strong. Part 5, Chapter 2. 4. Part 4, Chapter 2. My bad. Mrs. Dudley, the doctor said, putting down his fork, an admirable souffle. Mrs. Dudley turned to regard him briefly and went into the kitchen with an empty dish. The doctor sighed and moved his shoulders tiredly. After my vigil last night, I feel the need of a rest this afternoon. And you, he said to Eleanor, would do well to lie down for an hour. Perhaps a regular afternoon rest might be more comfortable for all of us. I see, said Theodora, amused. I must take an afternoon nap. I may look funny when I go home again, but I can always tell them that it was part of my schedule at Hill House. Perhaps you will have trouble sleeping at night, the doctor said, and a little chill went around the table, darkening the light of the silver and the bright colors of the china. A little cloud that drifted through the dining room and brought Mrs. Dudley after it. It's 5 minutes of 2, Mrs. Dudley said. Just going to quickly do this. Part 4, Chapter 3. Eleanor did not sleep during the afternoon, although she would have liked to. Instead, she lay on Theodora's bed in the green room and watched Theodora do her nails. Chatting lazily, unwilling to let herself perceive that she had followed Theodora into the green room because she had not dared to be alone. I love decorating myself, Theodora said, regarding her hand affectionately. I'd like to paint myself all over. Eleanor moved comfortably. Gold paint, she suggested, hardly thinking. With her eyes almost closed, she could see Theodora only as a mass of color sitting on the floor. Nail polish and perfume and bath salts, Theodora said, as one telling the cities of the Nile. Mascara. You don't think half enough of such things, Eleanor. Eleanor laughed and closed her eyes altogether. No time, she said. Well, Theodora said with determination, by the time I'm through with you, you'll be a different person. I dislike being with women of no color. She laughed to show that she was teasing and then went on. I think I will put red polish on your toes. Eleanor laughed too and held out her bare foot. After a minute, nearly asleep, she felt the odd, cold little touch of the brush on her toes and shivered. Surely a famous courtesan like yourself is accustomed to the ministrations of handmaidens, Theodora said. Your feet are dirty. Shocked, Eleanor sat up and looked. Her feet were dirty, and her nails were painted bright red. It's horrible, she said to Theodora. It's wicked. Wanting to cry. Then, helplessly, she began to laugh at the look on Theodora's face. I'll go and wash my feet, she said. Golly, Theodora sat on the floor beside the bed, staring. Look, she said. My feet are dirty too. Baby, honest. Look. Anyway, Eleanor said, I hate having things done to me. You're about as crazy as anyone I ever saw, Theodora said cheerfully. I don't like to feel helpless, Eleanor said. Your mother would have been delighted to see you with your toenails painted red, Theodora said. They look nice. Eleanor looked at her feet again. It's wicked, she said inadequately. I mean, on my feet. It makes me feel like I look like a fool. You've got foolishness and wickedness somehow mixed up. Theodora began to gather her equipment. Theodora began to gather her equipment together. Anyway, I won't take it off, and we'll both watch to see whether Luke and the doctor look at your feet first. No matter what I try to say, you make it sound foolish, Eleanor said, or wicked. Theodora looked up at her gravely. I have a hunch, she said, that you ought to go home, Eleanor. Is she laughing at me? Eleanor wondered. Has she decided that I am not fit to stay? I don't want to go, she said. And Theodora looked at her again quickly and then away and touched Eleanor's toes softly. The polish is dry, she said. I'm an idiot. Just something frightened me for a minute. She stood up and stretched. Let's go look for the others, she said. Now you see why I kind of just continued into chapter 3. Because those were just split into 2 chapters for whatever reason. Apparently to make it jaunting and more of a horror story. Sure. Oh, what was there? Something. Something in here that triggered what I wanted to say. Dang it. I keep forgetting. Like, I want to say things to you guys halfway through a chapter because it reminds me of something. But then I keep reading and I freaking forget. Oh, I remember what it is, actually. So if y'all don't watch Beelzebub, 3 weeks ago, there was a specific topic that I brought up essentially for everyone to make fun of me afterwards. Sam knows what I'm talking about. I don't know. I don't think Clinton was there. I don't think Dom was. Beelzebub's too late for him. Yeah. Sam knows what I'm talking about. But these, as I'm reading these things, it reminds me how I don't have an inner monologue or like a traditional one, because I do think. It's just apparently not how the rest of you think, because I don't hear the voices when I'm thinking. And like picturing things. I'm not actually seeing it in my mind's eye, because you can't, because it's not actually there. You're not actually seeing anything. Okay? You're not actually hearing anything. And I'm not getting stuck on definitions here. I'm not, whatever. Go watch Beelzebub 3 weeks ago. Just saying. Shut up, Sam. Anyway, like reading these thoughts, I can't imagine thinking like Eleanor. She is ridiculous. Like, is this how women actually think? And I'm not. I'm a huge tomboy. So like, maybe I don't understand. Okay, I don't understand women the way I think I do, because if I'm a certain way, I'm not the best at figuring women out, because I don't like girly things. So it's Eleanor's brain hurts me, and that's all I wanted to really say is I can't with her and her inner monologue, as it were. She drives me crazy. So anyway. Yeah, exactly, the goddess. And that's why I just really was like, I'm just going to go into chapter 3. And then, yeah, there was a lot of feet talk. It's very, very weird. I feel like Tarantino's on Seventh Day wrote the foot chapter. You guys are ridiculous. And my brain is not broken, first of all. Yeah, I corrected you. It's broken, not broke. Is broken, not is broke. But anyway, setting that aside, my brain is not broken. It's just different to yours. She really, really is not. And I don't understand. Like, maybe it's a product of the times when this was written. What was it, like 1945 or whatever? 1920s? Can't freaking remember. Yeah, it was the 40s, I think. She died in 65, which include New Yorker in 1948. Okay, so late 40s. It's a different time. So maybe at that time, I can't imagine it. Why would this be an interesting character? Like, World War II just ended. I don't get it. I don't believe you for 1 second, Sam. You're just being a contrarian because I corrected you. I kind of want to. I'm not kidding. Like this character, she's driving me up the friggin' wall. She I don't want to say she doesn't have any depth, but she really doesn't have any depth. Let's see. There are what, 235 pages? Yeah, 235 pages. Okay. We are on page. I left off on chapter 4. 111. She's really, really not my favorite. I can't believe we've read 111 pages inside of her broken brain. Yeah, I said broken. You and I were going to fight. I won't judge anyone if they do, if like maybe Dom and I are weird. And she's a cool character for you. I'll try not to judge you at least. Same people who praise this book also think the Bronte sisters are high art, erroneously, of course. I know that name, but I don't really know what you're saying. The Bronte sisters. Bronte. Is this like the Little Women people or something? Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights. I never read any of those. I kind of think classic literature is a bit pretentious. So that sounds about right, Sam. We still haven't got into any really good scary parts yet this far into the book. Crazy. Yeah, that's also another thing. Like I'm a lot disappointed in the horror aspect that this is supposed to be. I kind of feel like it's not misleading. I mean, the name itself is misleading when halfway through the freaking book and nothing has happened. Not really a haunting that besides doors closing. Yeah, super not scared. But I feel like I'm letting y'all down because I promised to read horror genre next. And this is what we got. I mean, it was done by poll, so technically it's not my fault. It's slightly my fault for putting it on the poll itself. However, I've never read it, so I wouldn't have known. Yeah. Okay, Sam. See, I feel like you have heard me rant about Bridgerton. Are you talking about the show? Oh, but really boring. Okay. Very well. I will take the ire out of my voice. And stop assuming what you're meaning. I apologize. Hey, Blue Cord, peace and prayers to you as well. Sounds like you're probably calling it a night, sir. You probably should get some sleep. Hopefully the pups are treating you nicely now. Hi, Jess. How's it going, my dear? Bronte sisters, Anne, Emily, and Charlotte also. No worries. Don't apologize for being late. It's been interesting. Have you read this before? Because I'm pretty disappointed in it. We're 111 pages in. It's not my favorite, let's say. I mean, yes, technically it is Devil's fault, and I will gladly blame him. That is a good point. Okay. Well, I don't know if you've listened to the previous ones, but our protagonist is not my favorite, and she likes to make things up in her head. And yeah, what is that term? It's not flighty. Maybe you can help me, Jess. Like, she's constantly daydreaming. There is a term for that. Like, unfocused technically applies. Oh, But yeah, she's not my favorite. I don't really connect with this character as a protagonist like at all. I'm hoping that she gets better as we continue on. So far, this is the people's thinking the place. Yes, right. Like we're halfway through the book, and they're just thinking that the place is haunted because some doors close themselves. But then we just got a scientific explanation as to why that's probably the case. Now, though, they've been propped open and the doors are closing themselves and like stools are getting put back in place. So, of course, their logical brain is thinking it's the caretaker. It's fine. It's not really haunty horror, scary stuff. So the more I talk about it, the more annoyed I get, which sometimes happens when something annoys me. So I'm trying to be nice and unbiased for you, but it doesn't work all the time. Well, hello, Bendover. Welcome. I don't know if you've watched these yet or if you're new. I appreciate you being here. But what we do here is I cook the books. I take that book list collecting dust in the corner and read it to you so you don't have to. I love to read and I don't have a lot of time to do so. So I decided that I was going to stream it for anyone who doesn't like reading but would like to read books at the same time. So welcome. Thank you. Right now we're The Haunting of Hill House, about halfway through. So if you go to my playlists for cooking the books, you can see the other books that I've done so far. If you want to listen to them while you work, while you clean, while you go to sleep, and anything like that, I appreciate. So maladaptive daydreaming. That is not the term I was thinking of, but I'll accept it. So Mud Crab, the doctor character annoys you, comes across as smug, all that. I was hoping you would notice that. Now let me give it lecture. Yeah, I mean, that's general professor behavior, though. I mean, when I was in school, I was doing a presentation, and it was on permeation, I believe. And so I started my presentation to the class by asking that, but I left a little bit too much time thinking that someone might know so they could answer. That stuck with me as a kid. So that's what it reminds me of. So like I expect a professor to actually do something like that. Wait to see if people are going to notice something. And if they do, get all excited and then give the lecture. Like give the information after you ask the question. Leave a little bit of time, but not too much. Things like that. Well, hello, Ruben. Good to see you. Yes. It is live. I go live at 6 p.m. Mountain Time every Thursday. If nothing, like barring any unforeseen circumstances, let's say, because last week I did have to cancel. But yes, I do them live. And then they go into the Cooking the Books playlist, and y'all can go back and watch the first one so you can catch up if you want to listen to them live. I don't think I've really advertised that before, so it's good to do so. Thanks for being here, Ruben. Appreciate you. Okay, we'll discuss offline to see exactly what you mean by involved, Jess. And yeah, we can figure something out. It'll be fun. And I don't know, I might do another horror one after this, so. People endowed with a vivid ability to daydream with grandiose personality traits may daydream to gratify their desires for power, dominance, and recognition, regulate their fragile self-worth, and achieve a compensatory sense of entitlement. Noted. Thank you, Legatus. Let's see, bend over. I knew I recognized your name, and I feel bad because I have kind of a terrible memory. So thank you for joining from Alf's recommendation, I presume. Thank you for the sub as well. Oh my gosh, I didn't even say that. So technically I hit 500. So the real Tomby was doing a live stream, and Alf gave me a shout out on Monday or Sunday. And got me like Monday At the time, it was like 23 subs, which got me over 500. And then I lost a few, so I'm no longer over 500, but I still got there and I was super excited. And I'm really bad about promoting myself just because I have a bunch of ideas in my head for this channel and I just haven't had the time to like create the videos, edit the videos and everything. So I feel bad promoting it if I'm not going to be able to give content to you guys besides this stream. And so that's why I haven't really like pushed it on social media and all of that. And so I was really excited. And if there's anyone new listening afterwards or who comes in now, thank you so much. I appreciate every single one of you so very much. So much. Thank you. Now that that's over. Blah. All right. Well, yeah, Cookie calmed down a little bit. All right. Well, you've come in at the tail end of tonight's stream. We're about to close out, but I did want to, like I said, tell you guys how much I appreciate you every time. Sorry, guys. I have a cover on my camera. So I use a dining room table. This is like our dining area. And I have like a whole friggin' command center because it's just my brother and I, and we don't like eat dinner together. So I'd rather not have all my stuff in my room and whatnot. So it's not like, so if I shake the table a little bit too much, the cover falls over sometimes, the camera. Oops. That's what that was. But anyway, yeah. Yes, Sam, I know. I'm still bad at that sometimes. You know I am. Anyway, I appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you again, Dom, for the stream elements tip. I really appreciate that. You know I do. Yeah, so this time, well, 2 hours before now, next week, Thursday, is when I will continue reading The Haunting of Hill House. We will be finishing up part 4, possibly going into part 5. And yeah, thank you again. Follow me on the social medias. I'm taking a little bit of a break right now. I'll promote things and stuff, but I won't be like doing much with group messages and all of that or scrolling through. I just need a mental break. But I'll still be on streams and whatnot. So see you guys tomorrow on Dermy Wormy's channel for Ballbusters, as well as the Beelza Hub on the Beelza Hub channel with Devil Made Me Do It, and Sam's channel Saturday at 4 p.m. Mountain Time for Screaming Into the Void. So I will see you guys later. Have a good night. Thank you so much. Whether you listen live or listen afterwards, you know I appreciate you beyond words that I can ever express. The fact that any of you are here warms my cold little heart. Bye, guys.